Hi, we're here with Zach Zadek, who is the winner of our 2014 New Voices project. Zach, can you tell us a little bit about how it was to win that and what was your experience immediately afterward?
Yeah, honestly, that was a really great experience. Mainly because I feel like, you know, coming from New York, you don't realize that there's really actually a very cool musical theater scene in LA. And that was my first experience working in that world. So getting the chance to go out there, work with some LA-based actors, work on the piece that we were developing, it was very cool. It was a really great experience to get to work on the other side of the country a little bit.
Awesome. Now, we've also heard you're a founding member of the Musical Theater Factory. Can you tell us what that is?
Yeah, Musical Theater Factory is, I would sort of best describe it as a collective of musical theater writers, performers, directors, a few designers, who sort of came together a few years ago in New York to support each other's work and give each other sort of development opportunities that they felt were lacking sort of in the city and in the world. It was founded by this wonderful artist, Shakina, who sort of brought everybody together into this donated space. And for sort of the first year and a half, it was people sort of just creating and putting up readings and putting up developmental workshops, new pieces in this space. And then since then, it's sort of expanded even beyond that to be in different locations around the city, basically just supportive developmental steps for musicals before they're ready for sort of front-facing industry stuff. It's more about developing the actual piece of the craft and refining each other's work and try to lend a helping hand to each other.
That's interesting. Have you used that process to workshop some of your own things?
I have a show called The Crazy Ones, which after we did, the first thing we did with that piece, we did sort of developmental reading in NIMF, the New York Musical Theater Factory, Festival, not Factory. And then after that, we were ready, we needed a sort of an intermediary step before our next major step for that piece. So we did a 29-hour reading through the Musical Theater Factory. It was a great chance to just hone in on the story we wanted to tell, hone in and get some really wonderful performers to see it on its feet. And actually, a lot of those performers are still working on that piece with us today. So it was a really cool step for us. Yeah.
So, in like that case, what does doing a 29-hour reading show you that you could work on in the show? How does that affect your process with a show?
Yeah, 29-hour readings are, at least in my personal experience, are sort of a beast unto themselves. They just sort of have a lot of conventions and a lot of restrictions that come with it. But at the same time, some of those can be very helpful and liberating in the sense that I find it's best to concentrate, to not try to get too overly ambitious with what you can do with that amount of time, especially if the performers that I'm working with or that someone's working with aren't familiar with the score. It just takes so much time teaching all the music and getting it to a relatively proficient place. That for me, it's the most helpful when I can sort of use it as a dramaturgical session and see, how's this song functioning, or how does this actually sound on a person outside of my own demos or outside of my own book writing? How do these words sound? How can I use the actors that are speaking and singing these words out loud in front of me to refine the text itself versus thinking of it too much as a presentational thing? Because it's very limited in time. It's also very limited in terms of the scope of what you can do physically with the actors. And I think the 29-hour readings that I've been a part of that have been the least effective have been ones where we got too ambitious with what we wanted the presentation to be and not about the work of the week itself.
Can you give us an example of a time where a 29-hour reading made you realize something about your show that you had to go back and rewrite? Have you had any revelations in that process, or?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I'll use The Crazy Ones as an example. That's the show about Steve Jobs.
Oh, interesting.
And it's when you're trying to distill a lot of real information into a 2-act show. One of the biggest challenges that we've been hit with and are still working through is what's the right section of the story to hone in on. because too much and it's not really a compelling arc for an audience. It's just cradle to grave. It's just an entire life story that's really not very focused and it's not saying very much.
Right.
But too limited, and it's too limited, and you miss the story. We don't have enough to get emotionally invested. So we did not our last 1 hour reading, but 2 readings ago of that piece. The show had always this is a little bit really specific, but I'll just give it to you. The show had always focused on a specific chunk of time, 1980 to 1984, where certain events that we thought were interesting were happening. And in the midst of that last reading, the one that I'm talking about, we realized, well, we need some more information on both sides of that timeline to color why we're emotionally affected by the events we're seeing. So in the midst of that process, we decided, okay, we're going to add a few songs that comment from the past and from the future and offer some other perspectives on the events that we're seeing in the piece.
Oh, wow.
And of course, there's a lot of writing, after rehearsals, but I find that, the work that the rehearsal time for 29-hour reading, that's just the actor's time. We're working all night to come up with new pages and get everything that we need from a creative side ready for rehearsal.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. Thank you. So you recently had a show close at Goodspeed Musicals. The premiere of your show, Deathless, right?
That's right, yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about how that came about and what the process was like?
Sure. The process was sort of wonderful. I mean, Goodspeed is a remarkable theater in Connecticut, where home of birthplace of many a wonderful musical. Annie was sort of their crowning achievement. But that process was really great because you're doing new work at Goodspeed. They're very good about being supportive of actually honing in the craft of the piece. And not getting distracted by some things that in a first production you just don't want to get distracted by. So, for example, that production wasn't reviewed because that wouldn't be conducive to the work that we wanted to do. So Tina Landau, my director on that show, and I were up there for both through rehearsals and also through the beginning of the actual production once we opened, making changes, refining, learning, seeing what steps we want to take in the future. And it was ultimately a really fulfilling experience, both in terms of the overall life of the show and the development, and also just the chance to have a first production that's at such a wonderful and supportive theater.
Awesome. So I'm going to throw you a kind of fun question we've been asking in all our interviews. If you had $100 million to spend on the development of new musicals, how would you spend it?
$100 million?
Yes, just if someone rained money on you tonight.
Okay. What I do, I would commission writers that I believed in, give them while they're writing their pieces, and I would produce developmental productions of as many pieces that I believed in and full-scale productions. I think that those are sort of the two opportunities I think, especially in our field, that are lacking. It's the financial support while you're writing a piece, because you really you're not getting money coming in when you're writing the show, but you still have to live. And I think that there are quite a few concerts and readings, and those developmental steps are sort of, those aren't that hard to come by, but it's the chance to see your work actually produced in a theater that. When I was working on this last production we just closed, I almost forgot that that's what it's about. That it's about a stage and curtains and sets and lights and people being off book and doing the actual show with us orchestra, and it's not about being behind music stands. So I'd say productions and commissions.
Got it. So this is a bit more of a vague, speculative question, but where do you think the future is headed for new musicals and musical theater in general?
I think the future is sort of by every metric that at least I can see around me, it's incredibly strong. I mean, in some ways, it feels like we're also in a new golden age of musical theater. Musical theater has never felt, at least to me in my lifetime, more culturally resonant more tied into the popular moment, or our cultural moment, I should say. And I think it's only going to go further and further from there. I mean, you can look at a show like, this is obvious, but besides just Hamilton, even a show like Dear Evan Hansen, where I have friends of mine who would never be caught dead singing a musical because that's not the thing. And they're singing, songs from Dear Evan Hansen and Hamilton to me and asking me about, like, oh, who's that? Who is that? What character is that? Watching movies that have songs written by, contemporary musical theater writers. I mean, it seems like in the next 10 years, musical theater is only going to become even more and more culturally resonant and more tied into the way the popular moment, the way it almost used to be, like when you could hear a Frank Lasser song on the radio. I think that's really where we're at right now, and that's so exciting.
Right. So correct me if I'm wrong, but you've written music for film as well, right?
I've scored a few films, yeah.
Right. Can you tell us, is there a different process for you when it comes to that? Is there differences that you enjoy, differences that you don't between musical theater and scoring for film?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few. I think the first is that, so the tenet that is most the same between those things is that the music in both those cases is exclusively to serve the story, right? It's not about the music for music's sake, unlike if you're writing like concert music or something. It's really just has to serve the story. In the case of scoring a film versus musical theater, or the theater, I should say, if I'm scoring a film, it's not my story that I'm telling. I'm in service of the filmmaker's story, and in my opinion, the job that I have the most if I'm scoring a film is to get out of the way and have the music just score the emotion, the story that the film and the visuals are telling. It's film is inherently a very different medium and a much more visual medium. And I think that it's important to sort of let the visual storytelling do the work and have music just stay under it to support what the film is already doing. That being said, both are storytelling.
Great. And to wrap up, can you tell us a bit about any projects you currently have underway and what's next for you?
Yeah, the two projects that I'm in the midst of right now is one is we've already talked about them both actually. One is the Crazy One, which is that show about Steve Jobs. We're developing that commercially right now. We have a few commercial presentations over the next few months. And the other is my piece Deathless, which just closed at Goodspeed. And we're gearing up for both our next developmental steps and, fingers crossed, our next production.
That's great. Thanks so much for taking some time out of your day to do an interview with us.
Of course.
All right. Great to have you. Bye.